the Naya Create started off as like a macro pad, right? Essentially.
Correct.
So where in the development or like the ideation process did the modules come?
But frankly, this is a happy accident. This is the kind of story where if you try to make an effective interface device, so something that allows you to effectively control video edits or effectively allows you to control CAD, you will not design a keyboard
Mm-hmm.
because keyboards are inherently so inefficient that it just didn't make sense even as a starting point. So when you set your own starting point, it already looks fundamentally different. And in that starting point, when you make a macro pad that is just meant for these tasks, you will automatically choose a different layout. And these layouts often involve your thumb and the area between your index finger and thumb in a very different way. And then when you use these, you realize, well, now I need to switch to a keyboard whenever I need to type something.
Right.
That's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
So it started out with exactly this kind of thing, a macro pad or a pad for hotkeys and simple input, numerical input, numpad, etc. with modules. 3D navigation, dials, etc. But then you figure out, okay, now I don't need to switch to my 3D nav device anymore, but now I need to switch to my keyboard to type. So you start adding more letters to this kind of macro pad until you have something that you can actually like halfway type with. So I back then started using a half QWERTY layout. So where you use a layer key to mirror half the keyboard onto one hand, so you can type fully with one hand. So where your Q key, when you press a macro key, becomes your P, and the macro key becomes H. So you can type simple, easy things with one hand, like searching in the domain, and because for my main work back then, CAD, you really do not want to move away from your mouse too much.
Right.
Switching to your keyboard to name a layer or search a command is just not sensible. It's not good in any way.
We have some comparison videos actually that show the inefficiency of this switching as well.
Yes,
so
on the Kickstarter. Yeah, exactly. So that is where that started. So I then started typing on a half keyboard. But that of course eventually brings up the question of, so most people don't want to learn typing with one hand. That doesn't seem like the most effective thing, and I would never type an essay with one hand or an email, right? That just doesn't make sense. And when I type something longer, then of course I'm switching away from my mouse.
Yeah.
So why not mirror the entire thing and have a full keyboard again?
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of having to switch with both hands to my keyboard, I would only, switch with one hand to type.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step is like, okay, now I have to switch between this and my mouse to move my mouse. But I only currently have a device on my left hand, like a 3D nav device or a dial, because that is what I needed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So why not add a mousing device to my right hand? So suddenly you have a touchpad or a trackball on your right hand. We're not the first ones to do that either. There are plenty of devices online that you will find that have that kind of functionality, because it's a common need for these kinds of products. And then suddenly someone complains, so why can't I have my touchpad on my left hand because I'm left-handed? Or I use my touchpad on my laptop with my left hand. Well, yeah, that's a good question. Why can't you? There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. I mean, we're already switching between dials and 3D navigation devices because it depends on what I'm doing. When I'm video editing, I need the dial, and when I'm in CAD, I need the 3D nav. So why not give you the option to just move the touchpad to the other side? It's very easy said, and then you try to figure it out how it will actually work, and you notice a few more problems, but they're all solvable.
Right.
And yeah, eventually you end up with this idea of, okay, it's really fully configurable. And then you start to see that the parts that you have put together actually create a much bigger total outcome than the individual parts you put in place. So once you combine your mouse motion with your keyboard, you notice, oh, I can now actually use keyboard hotkeys to change my mouse input without having to go through a complicated computer interface.
So it's like an emergent product in a way.
Exactly. Yeah, where you suddenly notice, oh wow, I can use layer keys on my dial, or I can use layer keys to change what my gestures do. And the kinds of new features that you come up with are more and more and more. Yeah, where you then see, actually, if I can use a touchpad on the left or right side, how about I use two touchpads and I configure one of them for mouse the other for like XY input. So
Mm.
as a color grading tool or as a color picker, or in programs like Logic Pro to adjust fields. And then you see how like putting these parts together suddenly gives you way more options than you would have with like standalone devices.
Right.
And that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is more than a cool side project, more than a something I want to have for myself because my use case was weird at the time. This is actually broad enough and has enough functionality and enough need that it might be something that not just I need.
Right.
And that is where we then started talking about this a little bit more and asked more people about their workflows, what they actually use, and how this looks in not just my world, but for everyone. And we started seeing the same complaint pop up over and over and over again online in discussions with people in those fields. And we saw that, well, the concepts we had, by expanding them a little bit more, would really address a lot of these fields. And yeah, that is where that entire story started.